Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio. You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
Hello again, this is Jay Shapiro. Thanks for listening. And I hope that all my Jewish listeners were able to enjoy the high holidays despite the restrictions. It was an unusual holiday season and hopefully only once in a lifetime. The big news of the last month is that the ill-fated Oslo process that was supposed to bring peace between Israel and the Palestinian Arabs is, for all practical purposes, dead and will remain only as a footnote in the history books. It was actually dead from the beginning back in the early 90s, but it took about 30 years to finally be buried. I have a book by Shimon Peres entitled The New Middle East that was written in 1993. I purchased it in a used bookstore in Brooklyn about 20 years ago for $1.19. It's probably worth a fortune today. The other big news is the signing of peace treaties between Israel and Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates last month might really signify a new Middle East. Let's hope and pray that it does. I discussed the diplomatic winds that are blowing today in this part of the world, and there are cause for optimism. So let us hope that things continue in a positive direction. The other item that I spend some time on in this program are the trends in American politics today, which are not very encouraging. Everything in America has become politicized and polarized to a point that I have never seen in my lifetime, and it does not augur well for the United States and the rest of the world. It seems that bipartisanship and compromise have disappeared, and neither the Democrat nor the Republican parties have shown a restraint nor a desire to de-escalate. This is the first time in my memory that this is the situation, so I say a few words about it, and I hope that somehow calm will come to the United States either before or right after the election. Let us hope and pray so. I'll be back after the break.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
When I was working for the Jewish Agency back in 1980 in the United States, an organization just had started called Peace Now. Now, what happened is that the White House peace signing ceremony between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain underscored the historic mistake of the Peace Now movement and its basic premise. And that's what I want to say a few words about. The stated goal of the movement was to persuade public opinion in Israel and Israeli governments of the need and feasibility of achieving a just peace and historic reconciliation with the Palestinian people and neighboring Arab countries in return for a territorial compromise and on the basis of the principle of land for peace. However, this declaration, which was said 42 years ago, has failed, stemming from its fundamentally erroneous concept, namely that the occupation, as they called it, was the root cause preventing peace and historic reconciliation would take place and everything would be good. In fact, the real reason was what, in the eyes of the Palestinian national movement, was Israel's illegitimate existence. According to this, the Jews are not a people or a nation, but a religion, and as such are not entitled to self-determination to a state. The eminent historian Professor Shlomo Avineri said, the Palestinians' basic concept is that Israel is a colonial state, an imperialist creation, and that the Jews, not being a people but merely a religious group, don't have a right to self-determination or statehood, unquote. This Palestinian polemic gained support among anti-Semitic and pro-Palestinian groups, both on the right and on the left, including the most recently the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Interestingly enough, the PLO never repealed the clauses in what's called the Palestinian National Covenant, which called for the destruction of Israel, even though it had committed to do so in the Oslo Accords in the early 1990s. Calling into question the moral rights of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, especially by Israelis and Jews, increases the Palestinians' determination to reject the option of making peace with Israel, believing that time is on their side. Sometimes you can tell an anecdotal reference will tell you what it was about. Professor Zalman Shovel was Israel's ambassador, tells a story about how he met a Palestinian boy on vacation on a Tel Aviv beach. The Israelis had allowed the Arabs from the West Bank to come and go to the beach. He met a boy there, and he said to the boy, what are your impressions of this Israeli beach? And the boy said to him, this is a Palestinian beach. So in other words, they never gave up their desire. And that's how they educated and still educate their children, by the way. The late Professor Ruth Gavison pointed out, denying the moral and concrete right of the Jewish people to a state, not the issue of the territories of the settlers, denying the right of the Jews to have their own state is the real reason for the conflict and the reason why it has not been resolved. This does not rule out Israeli compromise, but one can compromise only on what is yours and not on something you are not entitled to. So peace now, for all practical purposes, I think is a treasonous movement. Some of its actions, such as his call to refuse to serve in the territories, they ask Israeli soldiers, they tell Israeli soldiers not to serve in the territories. They are opposed to the nation-state law, and the support that they give, including financial, from foreign groups, as well as ongoing efforts to damage Israel's standing. This is what the Peace Now movement does. Perhaps it is poetic justice that Peace Now's U.S. sister organization was recently slapped in the face by the U.S. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's the leader of the anti-Israel and anti-Semitic progressive so-called squad. She refused an invitation just about 2 weeks ago to an event in memory of Yitzhak Rabin. Back in 1977, during Israel's peace negotiations with Egypt, the Egyptians tried to use Peace Now to promote their position on the talks. It didn't work out. In the U.S., the Logan Act, that was passed way back in 1799, by the way, It criminalized private and unauthorized negotiations with foreign states. While the Palestinian Authority is not a state, some of Peace Now's activity would be of questionable legality if a similar law were on the books of Israel. Now, the Oslo Agreements of 1993 signified a milestone for Peace Now, and in the terms of the Madrid Conference around the same time, the Americans still plan to include the clause of land for peace. So the high point in the fortunes of Peace Now also signal what essentially was the end or the trip down for Peace Now. Though its views are still part of the official positions of the UN, the European Union, and, interestingly enough, the U.S. Democratic Party, in light of the reality of the current diplomatic developments on the path to peace, even they would be hard-pressed not to recognize that this stance has largely become irrelevant. Israel's relations with the Arab world are much different than they were in those years. The cornerstone of Israel's approach was that peace with the Palestinians was the key to normalization and peace with the Arab world. This was ostensibly reinforced by the Arab Peace Initiative in 2002, which made normalization contingent on far-reaching Israeli concessions to the Palestinians. So these are the facts on the ground. Peace Now and its allies on the Israeli left, as well as various American administrations and the European Union, did not abandon this position that peace and stability in the Middle East depended exclusively on settling the Palestinian issue despite events in the world. So there's general chaos in this region. Iran has nuclear ambitions, none of which have anything to do with the Palestinian question. Though several Israeli leaders over the past 40 years diligently sought to advance a reality of peace, or at least an absence of belligerency, and failed in their efforts, the reason for their failure was not only Palestinian intransigence, but also incomprehension or not admittance of the Palestinian motivation and the Palestinian ideology. Prime Minister Shimon Peres had illusion about a non-existent new Middle East. He published a book, which I bought, and I'm holding on to it. Every year it becomes worth more because it describes a Middle East that did not exist and will not exist. The Begin and Moshe Dayan bypassed the obstacle in the Israeli-Egyptian peace talks, and Yitzhak Shamir and Rabin made a peace with Jordan. It was orchestrated by a gentleman named Yakim Rubinstein, who was a Supreme Court judge. At that time, he was a diplomat. Prime Minister Omer, desperate to retain his reputation, was ready to give away the store, but was misled by the head of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. Other prime ministers tried to do things, including Ariel Sharon. He did something really serious. He unilaterally disengaged from Gaza and a few points in northern Samaria, and that put us in danger. Now they're still shooting at Israel from the Gaza Strip. The world has changed, really, quite a bit. The Palestinians have not changed. A former British Prime Minister named Tony Blair spoke at a recent Jerusalem Post conference, and he said, contrary to the failed former concept that Israelis and Palestinians negotiate peace and then the rest of the region joins in, what you need to do is create peace between Israel and the Arab nations and include the Palestinian issue in that peace. And that is exactly what happened. Israel's new peace partners, like Egypt before them, are not turning their back on the Palestinians. They're putting their own interests first, with the backing of the United States and other parts of the world. So there's no longer peace by trading land, but peace as a worthy goal for all sides based on shared interest. And that is exactly what the situation is now. Other Arab nations, particularly afraid of Iran, and that's another story, that's the Shiites versus the Sunnis, they're more interested in their own defense and their own security. That's my summation about the Peace Now movement, which is now dead. I'll be back after the break.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
You're back with Jay Shapiro, and I want to say a few more words about our relationship with the Palestinians. Since the Palestinians created themselves right after the Six-Day War, they've had three allies: the European Union, the other Arab nations, and the United States. Now, things are changing fairly rapidly. In the last 4 years of the Trump administration, the Palestinians, realizing that Trump is not their friend, they've sought solace from U.S. rejection of their narrative by relying on the other two allies, the Arab nations and the European Union. It is one of the reasons they have pushed so repeatedly over the last decades to pass resolutions against Israel at the UN. With each massive vote count against the Jewish state, the Palestinians underscore the message that they possess what Israel lacks, which is international legitimacy. Among the most famous of these UN resolutions was the 2016 Security Council vote on Resolution 2334, condemning settlement activity. 14 of the nations at the Security Council voted for it. The one that didn't was the United States, and that was for some kind of strategic purpose. It was under the Obama administration, and what the U.S. chose to do was not to veto it, because in the Security Council, if the U.S. would vote no, that would have been the end of it. But the Obama administration was not that friendly toward Israel. In hindsight, that vote, which was a victory for the Palestinians, was probably one of the last moments of international solidarity with regards to the narrative of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because up to that point, Israel was being blamed for the failure of the peace process. From almost the moment he entered office, Donald Trump and his team began to whittle away at that paradigm, a move that created open hostility and ultimately a break in relations between the Palestinian Authority and the United States. The Palestinians rebuffed all U.S. peace plans. Until recently, they were sure that the international community, primarily Europe and the Arab world, was on their side. At the UN last month, the Palestinian Authority President Abbas called for an international peace conference on the basis of a two-state solution to our conflict to be held in January, a move for which he received a certain amount of lip service, followed in general with an anti-settlement and anti-annexation rhetoric. What followed was essentially a double slap to the face of the Palestinians. First, on the Arab world, which the Palestinians had already accused of betrayal because of the normalization deals between Israel and Bahrain and the UAE, without resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They saw this as betrayal. Now, it is true that up to now, Saudi Arabia hasn't gone along with this. However, the country's Prince Bandar bin Sultan bin Abdulaziz gave a major interview to a Saudi news outlet based in the Emirates, in which he blamed the Palestinians for not making peace with Israel. He didn't make do with just one throwaway line. He devoted an entire three-part series to the topic of the fact that the Palestinians are to blame for not making peace with the Jewish state. In other words, essentially, Prince Bandar breathed new life into the persistent Israeli charge that the Palestinians never miss an opportunity, as Abba Eban once famously said. At the same time, there was a meeting between the German foreign minister and his Israeli and United Arab Emirates counterparts in Europe. It was a one-day event, and during that event, these three people, representing these three countries, visited Berlin's Holocaust Memorial, where the UAE foreign minister paid homage to the 6 million Jews who died during the Holocaust. It was not simply a gesture of friendship, but a nod in the direction of Israel's never again narrative that links the survival of the Jewish people with the survival of the modern Israeli state. It indicated that the UAE accepts Israel as a necessity for the Jewish people and not just as an unfortunate reality that the UAE must contend with. When he signed the guest book at the Holocaust Museum, the representative of the United Arab Emirates signed with by writing "Never Again." On the diplomatic level, the meeting that was held in Berlin marked the first high-level Israeli-UAE meeting since the signing of the peace agreement back in September between the two countries. To the casual eye, it almost seemed like the latest in a series of feel-good moments that have occurred in the aftermath of the White House ceremony. But the public speeches there did not include any high-level representation from the United States, even though the deal with these countries was brokered by the Trump administration. In other words, effectively, this meeting was a European meeting. It was a European show. It was therefore one of the most public gestures a European country, Germany, has made to show its support for the U.S.-backed Israeli-Arab normalization process. Effectively, Germany was letting the Palestinians know that they could no longer find a comforting shoulder to lean on in Berlin in its battle with the U.S. against the U.S. and against Israel. On the surface, Germany, along with Europe, has paid lip service to support the Palestinian argument. There should be two-state solutions and pre-1967 lines, a halt to settlement activity, no annexation, and all the usual things. But so far, that support has rested on statements not unlike those also made by the UAE and Bahrain, while at the same time they're advancing peace with Israel. In other words, it is simply the Europeans, like Germany, are paying lip service, only lip service, to the Palestinian cause. Now, Germany is not the only European nation taking those steps. The European Union foreign policy chief, a guy named Josep Borrell, according to reports, rejected a Palestinian request for additional money to help it protest Israeli annexation plans. Upon hearing that Israel planned to annex settlements, the Palestinian Authority stopped accepting Israeli transfers of its tax revenues, a move that has shaken its already fragile economy. There are people starving. Rather than support that move, the European Union has let the Palestinians know that now that Israel has suspended annexation, it should accept the tax transfers. By the way, it's interesting because a lot of people here in Israel, including myself, were upset when our prime minister didn't go with the annexation plans for the Jordan Valley in September, but it's part of the larger diplomatic picture. Now, the European Union did this even though they had known that Israel planned to go ahead with approval and advancement of plans for upward of more than 4,000 West Bank settlement homes. So the combination of the Saudi and European messaging has almost seemed to have left the Palestinians adrift without an oar in a new diplomatic sea. As I said in the beginning, they had the three allies, European Union and the Arab states and the U.S. And now it seems that they've lost the U.S. support, they've lost the European Union support. And that leaves them only with the Arab state. Now, of course, not everything is a loss. Arab states stood with the Palestinians at the United Nations Human Rights Council, and they voted against Israel. But that's all votes in the UN, which are essentially, for all practical purposes, meaningless. So, they say a stool that has three legs doesn't tip over. And the Arab and the Palestinians had three friends: the European Union, the Arab nations, and the U.S. And now two are gone. History has shown that diplomatic winds can change swiftly, like a tornado. However, this last couple of weeks, and especially since September 15th, when the signing in Washington, the winds appear to be suddenly blowing heavily in Israel's favor. Obviously, things can change, but right now we're in a very optimistic position, and the winds seem to be blowing in the right direction for Israel. I'll be back after the break.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel?
Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
You're back with Jay Shapiro, and although I generally do not speak about politics in the United States, because that's not my job, nor am I an expert, but several things happened this week and are happening that caused me to think about it, and I just want to share my thoughts for what they're worth with the listeners. First of all, I spoke with several members of my family in the States who were extremely anti-Trump. And when I asked them why, what is it about his policies that they don't like, the answer I got was they simply don't like him. For example, you would assume that Jewish people would be happy that Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. He moved the American embassy here. He recognized the Golan Heights, but this does not affect the thinking of the people with whom I spoke. They just don't like Trump. That's the first thing. Second of all, this week I watched the hearings for the choice of a Supreme Court justice to replace the one that has just passed away, and the Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And the behavior of the people, the senators, was really, I think, quite disgraceful. They carried on terribly and didn't speak to the subject. They even brought signs and all kind of things. And I don't ever remember. We in Israel look up to the United States as the paradigm of democracy and proper behavior, but it seems that something has happened. At present, it seems that everything in America has become politicized and become polarized. The rapid rise of Donald Trump to the presidency was against immense odds on both sides of the political aisle. Even his victory was by the thinnest of margins. It was only the fifth time in U.S. history where the winner won the electoral college but lost the popular vote. And Trump came in as an outsider, and his victory was a referendum essentially against the status quo politicians. For what did the status quo politicians do? They focus on social issues for electoral favors. While the blue-collar regions, like in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Ohio, they became devastated from the loss of manufacturing jobs going to foreign competition like China, and also due to automation, the people there turned to using all kinds of drugs even as a coping mechanism. In other words, the area where the blue-collar people live were very disappointed in what was happening. So essentially, Trump's victory was an anti-establishment victory, and it began a political insurgency where the Republicans were pitted against the status quo Democrats. And this set the stage for a hostile relationship where Trump, who is quite abrasive, has to cooperate with an opposition which has actively questioned his legitimacy through congressional investigations for the last 3 years, and also Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, said that you're going to sometime. The election is only like 40 days off. He's speaking about using an amendment of the Constitution to kick the president out. So it can be argued that the continuous negative coverage and congressional actions are a result of Trump's rhetoric and his behavior. The precedent for his administration was set during his campaign. He never expressed interest in operating within expectation and norms of the U.S. presidency, and a lot of people at that time liked it because they were sick of the regular politicians. On the other side of the aisle, the Democratic National Committee's leadership is full of established politicians like U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Democratic Party candidate Joe Biden and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who represent professionalism within their ranks and across bipartisan lines, and they simply don't behave the way Trump does, or I should say Trump doesn't behave the way they do. But in the face of Trump, the Democrats chose to break his will by meeting him in political brutality. In other words, they gave up their professionalism, decided to act just like Trump. But unfortunately, it seems he does it in a better way. This is epitomized, by the way, by what happened during the State of the Union. Trump came in to give the speech to the combined Congress, and he refused to shake Pelosi's hand. It was disrespectful, unprofessional, and it doesn't live up to the norms of presidential etiquette. So, in the meantime, she got up. She obviously pretended not to listen to his speech. She was holding a copy of his speech in her hand, which she's given to ahead of time. And at the end of his speech, while he was being applauded by the audience, she got up and very ostentatiously tore the speech up. And that was she answered his being disrespectful by being just as disrespectful. So the norms have changed. But when the career politicians stoop to the level of non-professionalism, it breaks the norms of professionalism on which the politicians have built their careers, and it damages political integrity, and it essentially legitimizes Trump's antics as acceptable if they do the same thing. The U.S. politics has become a merry-go-round of antagonism where neither party has shown restraint nor a desire to de-escalate. Now, thank goodness there isn't overt political violence between the parties. Still, this is extremely concerning, because the political goal seems no longer to be centered on public service to the constituents. The goal seems to be competition and domination over the opposition, and in the fear that their opponents will ruin the country beyond repair. Now, the result of this is that this dynamic erodes compromise and bipartisanship, which is the essential of American government. It replaces the bipartisan model with contrariness as an ideology and the politicization of everything. Now, during normal times, this is not good. And it's terrible to see the United States sinking into this. Compromise is what kept the United States going since its founding. But currently, the Union is plagued with a myriad of challenges, including managing the public health crisis caused by the virus, economic consequences of the pandemic, months of racial demonstrations. Some cities there have been riots for weeks, for months already. pressure to defund the police and civil unrest in places like Portland and Seattle. All of this is exasperated by the presidential election, which is coming up in about a month. And right now, while I'm making this program, it's become even more pressing following the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So the president, they're now having meetings and hearings to choose a replacement, which is fully within the constitutional order. There's nothing wrong with what the Republicans are doing. However, the Democrats are saying it's unconstitutional. I watched them on television, and I was shocked what the Republicans are doing by choosing a replacement is certainly within the bounds of the Constitution, but to just simply say that it's unconstitutional, that's not an answer. You can have all kind of reasons that make sense. Also, the Democrats are holding off that the replacement shouldn't be made until after the elections because they expect to win. But the Democratic candidate refuses to say who he would nominate to replace Ginsburg. So the U.S. Politics have really hit a new low. And I'm sad to say this, as someone who was raised in America and always felt, even here in Israel, we looked to the United States for leadership, particularly in politics. We have a different system. There was a certain decency and politeness in politics, but somehow that's gone out the window, and it's not good for the United States. It's not good for people who admire the United States. So I wanted to share these thoughts with the listeners, but the truth of the matter is they really bother me. I had to get it off my chest. I'm using the program as the way to do it. Forgive me. Till next time, Jay Shapiro, signing off.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.